everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. So normally we kind of talk about a disorder or kind of a process or a facet of a disorder. But today we're actually going to talk about a skill because I think this skill is so useful and helpful and is so widely applied that it's something that you can start today. And even a little bit of practice can improve mental health a lot. There are so many benefits, and the benefits only increase as you practice more. And that skill is mindfulness. So mindfulness is something that is talked about all over the place, on social media, wellness sites, wherever. And I think a lot of people, when they hear mindfulness, think meditation. They're like, oh yeah, I practice mindfulness, I meditate. And that might be true. But mindfulness is actually a separate thing from meditation. Mindfulness has three major components. And I like to remember that because mindfulness has 3 syllables. So the first component is being non-judgmental. And I really love this because it's something we don't even realize we're doing. So when we're being non-judgmental about our own thoughts, what we're doing is we're not saying, if I were a better wife, I would do this, or I should stop what I'm doing, cook dinner for my kids, I can't, no time for relax. This is, these are the things I should be doing. And sometimes it's true that there are actions we could take that are more in line with our values. Sometimes, we really do have to get up on our feet and go do something. But we use a lot of judgment around our own emotions, like it's bad to feel angry, or oh, I'm just crazy right now. An example I like to use is when I was 14, it was a cowboy theme day at my high school. And so I'm wearing these high heels and a denim skirt because obviously that's what cowgirls wear when they are lassoing, etc. And there was a car barreling down the street, even though I was at the crosswalk, and I screamed and flew back. The car actually hit me a little bit, and I was splayed out on the street, all embarrassed, in my heels. Yeah, Kibby's looking at me with a shock. This guy, I don't know if he was a drunk driver or what, because he didn't stop. And, what I could have done was say, oh, wow, my fear reaction of leaping back, and screaming, that really saved me from this car. If I didn't have that reaction, I could have gotten really, really hurt. And so you leave it there and you go on with your day and nothing's bad. But another thing I could have done, and that I think a lot of people do, is they get really embarrassed. They're like, oh my God, it was so embarrassing that I just screamed right there. And this dirt on my body is embarrassing. And the way I am out on the street, how could I do this? How, and you build this whole negative narrative on top of this very simple thing that happened that doesn't even need to be there. None of that negativity needed to ever exist at all. But that's what happens when you start judging yourself and judging your emotions. And the second thing that can happen, so the second part of mindfulness that's super important is being present focused. So a lot of the time we may notice ourselves thinking, if I go to this event, there's going to be a lot of people there I don't know. Oh my gosh, what if I embarrass myself? What if my employer is there and then I do something and then I get fired? Or what if that guy is there that I like and, I embarrass myself and then I never date again? We get really future focused. We're thinking sometimes 20 years into the future. Or we start being past focused. You show up at the party and you're like, oh no, why did I wear this outfit? I should have prepared for this. I should have practiced in the mirror or something. I should have done all of these different things. Now you're days into the past. And again, sometimes years into the past. And all of that is also kind of building on this negativity that doesn't really need to be there. Versus staying present focused, you're thinking, okay, I'm in the moment. Here's the situation. Here's how I can attune to it and attend to it. And it doesn't need to get bigger than that. And the third part is just being emotionally aware. And this is something that we talk about a lot. Just knowing what it is that we're actually feeling in that moment. Getting really kind of attuned with ourselves and understanding what's going on so that we can sort of respond more skillfully to the moment. We've talked about this before, but our emotions are like road signs. They tell us what's important to pay attention to, and we can choose to listen to them or not. And so being emotionally aware just sort of tells us, like, okay, this is what my body is trying to tell me. I'm aware. Now I can act skillfully and mindfully.
Yeah, no, that's a great breakdown of what the mindfulness skill that we tend to weave into a lot of mental health treatment. So as you could probably tell from, I could probably tell from what you're saying in this definition, there are so many benefits that can be useful for when someone's trying to get treatment for depression or anxiety or things like that. So, I mean, when people are like, what's the difference between mindfulness and meditation? Well, mindfulness, as you described, is that state of mind, that present focused, without judgment, and just like being aware and accepting of what is in the moment, like whatever emotions are there, whatever thoughts are there, things like that. Different activities like meditation, yoga, prayer, all those kind of contemplative or meditative practices promote that state of mindfulness. So that's the difference. And those practices and interventions are woven in through a lot of contemporary cognitive behavioral therapies, which I'll talk about in a minute, because there's so many benefits for mental health. But I actually got into mindfulness in kind of this roundabout way where I was in college, and I, at the time, struggled with a lot of, anxiety, like a lot of emotions, a lot of anxiety and depression, especially with things going on with my mom, as I talked about before. And I just started going to a yoga studio that was a couple blocks away from college. And I just happened to find a really good teacher. I did Vinyasa yoga, which is like power yoga. But this teacher, April Martucci, she's like still one of my life mentors, but she really wove in a lot of the mindfulness teachings in while we did yoga. So even though it was like a very physical practice, I was going there for the exercise. It really helped me cultivate that state of mindfulness, of paying attention to the present moment, being aware of my thoughts and judgments, right? Like a lot of what we do in our day-to-day life is we think and react to things habitually, like out of habit. So when something happens, like you fall on the ground in heels and a skirt, and then your mind automatically makes judgments and opinions, and you automatically just start thinking about it in a certain way, like start to go into your stories, think about the future, think about the past. But mindfulness helps you slow that process down and just stay present. And so you might not go into your normal habits of thinking, right? So it's super useful for if you have a tendency to think catastrophic thoughts, think of the worst case scenario and get super anxious. Mindfulness is used in a lot of therapies to just like slow down, take one thing at a time, help people stay present and aware that their minds might go into those anxiety thoughts, but maybe like take a step out from them. So eventually people feel like they have a little bit more control over all of those thoughts and feelings, or a little bit of a perspective on it, which could be super helpful, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember trying to get into meditation and yoga, and it just didn't really click with me, but I also didn't understand what I was doing. Like, I don't think the link between mindfulness and meditation had ever been made for me. And so I was just sitting there being like, okay, I'm breathing. The point of this is to calm myself down, right? Like, that's what meditation is, except that's not what the point is. And I think a lot of people get kind of confused and discouraged because they don't actually understand what it is they're really doing or aiming for.
It's a really good point. I think that especially when you look at all the Instagram ads or whatever of people sitting on a cushion or being on a Tibetan mountain, they think it's just about blissing out and getting rid of your problems and being super happy and calm. And it's really not that. It's about learning how to cope better with your struggles, like cope better with the negative emotions, negative thoughts, and look and pay attention to them and step back and build this like meta awareness about them. So in fact, it could actually be even more distressing than, if we're normally avoiding and distracting ourselves from our pain or any kind of distress, and to start to pay attention to and seeing what's actually there. It could be hard at first. I mean, this is when I think about how I learned mindfulness and what impact it had on me. Before I came to it, I was just, like anybody else, when you're having a bad day or when you're angry or upset, it could color the way you're seeing things. So I would spend all day like being irritated at everyone, like why is anyone listening to me? Like maybe people are judging me, and going having a regular practice, like a regular yoga practice. What that did is gave me like kind of like this template, this kind of frame that's the same each time. I had the same mat, I had the same class, the same teacher, same spot, same poses. And I could really see my own reactions over time that shifted during, over the course of like a day or different times of the day, right? Like if I was having a bad day and thinking about, oh, everyone's judging me or whatever, and then I go into yoga and then I'm doing my normal poses and thinking like, oh, my teacher's judging me, the person next to me is judging me. Having that state of like present awareness made me realize like, oh, my mind is doing things. My mind is assuming that everyone's judging me. Maybe that's not what's happening. Maybe this is just me bringing this in. So it helped me step back and see my thoughts like almost kind of like from a third person perspective, which helped me kind of like disengage from them. So then I was a little bit less reactive and angry, you know, and I was just like, oh, I'm coming in with my own stuff and my own baggage, and I'm projecting it all over the place. And that led to some calming, right? That led to like a little bit less anger because I realized what was me versus like what was in the present moment.
So because it can kind of sound like mindfulness is like never judging yourself for your actions, and then like never thinking about the future or the past. So how do you balance both non-judgment and actually I should get up from the couch and go do work or go cook dinner?
It's cultivating the skill. Our minds are meaning-making machines. They get input, they get stimuli or some stuff from the present moment, and then we automatically make opinions and judgments about them, right? Like a person looked at me in class, I think that person's judging me, right? It's like something in the present moment to the judgment. So I think it's unreasonable to think that we would just have no judgments, but at least you're practicing paying attention to the present moment, like what you see, what you feel, what you receive from your senses. And then almost kind of like taking a pause, like undoing the automatic jump from that to the judgment, but just like pausing, taking that in, and then noticing what judgments the mind is coming up with. So eventually those judgments kind of become less powerful, but they might still be there. It's just learning how to like put that pause in between, like, perceiving something in the present moment and making sense of it with judgments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So one that I thought of is a breakup. I think this is a familiar sensation to many, but we go through a breakup, or let's say we got dumped, and our thoughts immediately jump to either judging yourself, like, what did I do wrong in this relationship? I must have done something terrible. I must be ugly, or I must be bad in bed, or I must be, X, Y, and Z. Then getting present focus, like, I really loved him. Now I'm never going to be happy again. I'm never going to find another partner. I'm going to die alone. And then past focused, like, what did I do to make him leave me? I should have been more affectionate. I should have cleaned the house more. I should, all of these sort of like past regrets, future catastrophizing, judging yourself. So the mindfulness, I guess, would be saying like, I'm going to put some space between this automatic urge to catastrophize and excavate the past and all this judgment. And then I'm gonna really get clear on this. I'm going to take care of myself. And then when I'm in a mindful place, I can look at, okay, what maybe contributed to this breakup? Like, how can I learn from this?
Yeah, I think the way I would apply mindfulness there, if that was a client or me, is that often when we go into those, really go into those rabbit holes of judgment, what did I do? What can my future, blah, blah, blah. Actually, what that might do is distract us from the present moment, which might be an emotion, right? Or something that you're going, like, if you're going through a breakup and feeling like thinking all those things and try to figure out, right, that actually might take you away from the present moment, which is just like you're feeling sad, right? Like you feel that loss, you feel that pain, and your mind is trying to make sense of all that pain. But mindfulness would be applied of just sitting and noticing that sadness. And instead of making stories out of it, instead of going down, which could lead you to depression, anxiety, and other things, just like opening up and accepting the present moment feelings. So that's often where, in therapy, we would use the mindfulness.
And I guess what happens there is, what we're trying to do is escape the emotion. We're trying to escape the sadness by any means necessary. But if you just sit there and accept the sadness, you can listen to what it's telling you to do, which might be get in bed, take care of yourself, and call a close friend, feel loved, like get more kind of grounded and centered.
It's like what you were saying before, that we tend to add suffering onto pain, right? If we go through a breakup, we have a loss, we have difficulties in life. Of course, there's pain in life, right? Mindfulness doesn't erase that. Nothing could erase that. But we have a tendency to add suffering on top of it, a pain of a breakup or loss, and then we add all the reasons why we'll be alone forever. Right? And that could go from, and so a lot of the therapies like acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy teaches you the skills to just be able to sit with what is, like your present moment experience, without running off into all the different thoughts and judgments that would lead to prolonging the depressed mood, right? Yeah. Or making you more anxious than you need to be.
Yeah. Or just not attending to what your body is telling you to attend to.
Exactly.
Sadness tells you to take a minute and take care of yourself. But all this whole negativity palace you build on top of it might tell you to do something wildly different, like go knock down your boyfriend's door or something, or go get super drunk, which is the opposite of taking care of yourself.
Yeah, I think at least this is for me, but I always have said that mindfulness and yoga has given me a home in myself to be able to sit with difficult things, which is powerful. It almost gives me secure attachment to myself. Before I met yoga, feeling lonely, feeling angry, feeling hurt and sad was just so overwhelming sometimes that I would do things to distract myself, right? Like, think a lot about something else or just, avoid it in some way. But mindfulness gave me somewhere tools to be able to just sit and be like, okay, I'm just feeling really sad right now. It's okay. I'm just going to pay attention to it and not run away from it. So, yeah. And that skill in and of itself is used a lot in therapy these days.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm not necessarily excellent at mindfulness myself. And meditation, it doesn't go like that badly for me, but I get frustrated quickly and it's hard for me to maintain a practice. But learning about mindfulness is kind of putting things in place for me. I feel like I'm understanding our minds, emotions a bit better now. I always had this confusion of we're supposed to listen to our emotions, but sometimes our emotions get way blown out of control. And when do we stop listening to them? And I think what blows them out of control is not being mindful a lot of the time. Because anxiety is important to listen to, but are you listening to anxiety that is telling you something about the present moment, or is the anxiety because you're catastrophizing, 2 weeks down the line, or because you're judging how you're feeling? And that's a different kind of emotion, I guess, or emotional experience.
Yeah. First of all, pointing out that I'm pointing this out because a lot of people say this when they first start mindfulness. There's no really such thing as being really good or really bad at mindfulness, right? That in itself is a judgment on your practice, right?
Yeah,
it's if you're doing it and noticing your mind is darting around, a lot of people have a judgment on that and they say, "Oh, I'm bad at mindfulness." Where the mindfulness practice is learning to be like, "Wow, my mind was all over the place today." That's what I noticed, right? That was just the thing in the present moment. My mind went from this topic to that topic to thoughts about how I'm doing, and even just that meta awareness is the mindfulness. So that just to say that's
I know I did a bad Kibby, except it wasn't a bad. That would be a judgment.
Exactly. It's nothing.
I did a nothing.
What was the other thing you were talking about?
I don't know. How it just sort of, it feels like I'm starting to understand more about how our minds and emotions work. How like...
Oh, yeah. No, I think when people practice a lot of mindfulness, it looks like, it's not like they've changed everything dramatically. It's not like people stop being sad or angry or anxious or whatever, but they're able to be in the driver's seat. Instead of letting the anxiety take over and they're just spiraling into the hole of, a fear, they're able to say like, oh, my mind is running on the anxious thoughts right now. And even just that, right? It could have a little bit of space, perspective, that you could react to it differently and not just let it take over. So, even there's some really cool research showing that if people practice mindfulness, either long-term or even in the moment, it actually can change the way you emotionally react to things. So there's research showing that if people practice mindfulness and then showed like neutral film clips, sad film clips, and positive film clips, and people who practice mindfulness react to the sad film clips differently. There's like less neural activity in self-referential processing, language, and things like that. So they're able to watch the sad movies without like going into the story about themselves or thinking about it or letting it take over, and they report a little bit less sadness in response. So it actually changes the way you react to emotional experiences.
It also changes your attention, your focus, because, the other thing about mindfulness is, it's present focused, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's everything in the present focused. You can also choose what to attend to in the present. We talk about this when treating misophonia, like these sounds, misophonia is where you become really distressed when hearing certain sounds, usually chewing. You might be at dinner and like the sound of chewing, it's right there. It's in the present for sure, but you can actually mindfully attend to your food instead, or the conversation instead. And so it's really training. It's training what you attend to, and that's a skill I'd like to have for sure.
Yeah, it's in a lot of treatments for ADHD to practice mindfulness so you get that attentional control back. So it helps like self-control, attentional control, a lot of benefits. I will have to say though that in the news there's a little bit more discussion about, not in the news and research as well, a lot of discussion about like the dark side of mindfulness. I think because people are so excited about it, it's like they think that it's just going to be the cure-all. People, download an app and they practice but a lot of people actually start to have some negative downsides. First thing is, especially if people have different expectations for what mindfulness is, so they think it's going to make them happy and bliss out, and then they start to learn to pay attention to their anxiety thoughts and the present moment, their anxiety might go up, or even negative emotions might go up because you're like not avoiding it for the first time in a while, right? So people might be surprised and they might feel worse when they first start mindfulness. So that caveat there.
Is that really a downside of mindfulness though, or is that just the short-term consequence of doing something that is long-term beneficial?
Yeah, it's the same thing as therapy. It's the same thing as working on yourself at all, to bring some awareness in there, where at first you might get worse because we have all these mechanisms to avoid and distract, and now we're like facing them for the first time. So it is a short-term, but people start to freak out and start to think like, oh, this made me more anxious, or I'm bad at it or whatever. But so, that's also there too. But a lot of mindfulness practices involve paying attention to the body. Like you improve interoceptive awareness, which is like paying attention to your insides, basically. And if people have like a lot of negative and strong negative associations with that, like eating disorders or panic disorder, right? Or like paying attention to body cues leads to distress really, really quickly. Mindfulness can be really hard in the beginning. And, we usually say, make sure that you have some therapy or understand that this is going to be the case, because it can make those symptoms way more intense if you just like dive into a mindfulness practice. So, it's very beneficial for a lot of people, but we have heard people say, I tried mindfulness and it made my panic disorder worse. And so now I'm going to give up mindfulness. It's like, no, it's, you just like threw gasoline on a fire in a way, right? And so without like proper guidance, without like a good therapist or Like even just like a meditation guide or teacher can be really helpful for that.
It does seem though that I mean, even the first two prongs would still be helpful, like non-judgment, present focused awareness. I guess the problem is what usually gets us into a mindful state is being present with our breath or noticing noticing physical sensations. But I feel like maybe the general principle could still be applied to, you notice your thoughts running into the future, just notice them, bring them back to the present moment.
Totally.
You notice judgments
Yep.
running, and that seems pretty universally applicable, but I could be
Definitely. And for people with eating disorders and panic disorder, for example, that I brought up, mindfulness is super helpful and integrated in a lot of treatments for those disorders. But I'm saying if people
like
just
download
try
a meditation app or something.
Yeah,
and-
if they just
yeah.
try it and without like proper treatment, or if they're if they're too distressed, it could just be
Yeah.
overwhelming in the beginning. So it's okay. I mean, it's still beneficial. I'm just saying that if for the listeners out there who said I tried it and made me worse, then just to know that that is the short-term downside. But what I always say that regular mindfulness practice is the best. Mm-hmm. Just jumping in for an hour or one day or whatever, you might not get the full benefits. It's really the consistent practice that's helpful.
Well, shall we practice?
Yeah. Okay. All right.
You're going to run me through one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is just a regular breath practice, and this is going on the principle of paying attention to physical sensations of breathing, because that's the present moment stimulus, right? And we're just going to notice if your mind goes somewhere else, and if so, we're going to bring it back to the breath, okay? So, Jacqueline, and for everyone listening, all right, you could, wherever you're sitting, that's fine. You could keep your eyes open or eyes closed. If you keep it open, just keep it soft on the table. All right, I'm going to close my eyes. Sitting up really tall. I'm really feeling your sitting bones grounding into your seat. Maybe feel your feet on the floor. Good. Reaching the crown of head up to the ceiling so you have a nice long spine. Rolling the shoulders back and down so you have a nice open chest. Softening the face, softening your jaw, softening your belly. Letting your hands be soft too. Don't hold on to tension, just let it go. And right now, just bringing the attention to the breath. Maybe pick a spot on the body where you feel the breath the most. Maybe in your belly, a gentle rise and fall, each inhale and exhale. Maybe the cool air coming into your nose. Maybe it's your collarbones and shoulders gently lifting with each breath. And just notice the physical sensations of breathing as you inhale and exhale. And if your mind wanders to something else, like a thought or a judgment, just notice that thought and just bring your attention back to the breath. No big deal. Just bring it back home to the breath. And whenever you're ready, bring your attention back to the room, your feet on the floor, seat on the chair, the light behind your eyelids, and slowly opening your eyes. What did you notice?
I felt that my thoughts did not wander as much as they have in previous meditations, maybe in part because of the brevity, but I guess I also noticed sometimes I was sort of looking at, how at the light behind my eyelids a lot, and so maybe just like keeping focused there kind of helped.
So you notice that your mind is comparing this practice with previous practices.
No, I'm noticing that right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is all just, just all mindfulness. There's nothing wrong, even having a judgment is not wrong. It's just noticing it. That's the whole point, right?
I think I did have that thought at one point, but
no, and you also notice that your mind is going to visual input, going into noticing the light behind your eyelids even before we start to do that.
I sometimes can get pretty cool visuals, and then I don't know whether that counts as my mind wandering, because I really enjoy those, and I don't know.
Hey, you know what, too? And this is, I'm glad you brought this point up, because some people don't like these kind of practice, don't like the seated breathing practices. And to that I say, if there's other ways that you could practice mindfulness, go for it. For you, if you're visually oriented and visual things really grab your attention, you can do mindful painting, right? Or you just do something visual, or look at art, and you really bring your attention to what you're seeing.
Yeah.
And, I'm a more, physical movement oriented person. So yoga was the way that I was introduced to mindfulness, but everyone's different. So if this seated breathing thing doesn't work for you, there are other ways to practice. So I would just say that to not discourage people from exploring.
Yeah, I think that's the mistake that maybe the media or whatever popular culture kind of talks about mindfulness, with this heavy tie with meditation. Meditation is a very specific way to practice it, but I try to practice it I have problems with not being, I've talked about this endlessly on this podcast, but not being very emotionally present when I'm connected with another person, or avoiding strong, even positive emotions, feelings of lovingness, loving feelings or affectionate feelings. And so when sometimes when I hug Paul or cuddle with Paul, I try to take that as a mindful moment, really feel, how does it feel to have this person, holding me? Can I feel the oxytocin coursing through, my veins? Not letting my mind wander to what I'm going to eat that day or whatever, but just taking a second. And it's not like I do it for 10 minutes, but even 30 seconds can do a lot of good.
No, that's a really good segue into using mindfulness with your loved one, right? There's also ways to practice mindfulness and different meditations that can improve relationships and things like that. So even just mindfulness in itself, this is what my dissertation showed, that it can change the way you see other people. It can change the way you can read emotions in other people. It actually improves the way you pick up on their emotions, and it just, improves empathy skills in general. So even just plain mindfulness of practicing in any way you do it. But there's specific kinds of meditations that are especially useful for relationships. You look into loving kindness meditation, metta, M-E-T-T-A is another word for it, where the whole point of that meditation is to cultivate the feeling of compassion and love and warmth for other people. Really lovely, simple practices. Some are just repeating a mantra in your mind, thinking of someone's particular or a group of people in particular and just wishing them, the simple one is picturing someone like Paul or, a group of people are suffering and thinking, may you be happy, may you be free from suffering, and may you be safe, right? Just breathing, closing your eyes and thinking that over and over again, and really imagine sending that emotion of compassion to that person that you're visualizing. So that's a very specific kind of meditation that uses the state of mindfulness, being very present and very focused for an application of bolstering these feelings of warmth and empathy to other people. So very cool stuff. There's also relational mindfulness, where two people can do a mindfulness practice together, where they'll do an activity together, but very mindfully, that hugging is really nice. So there's all these ways that people can enhance their connection through mindfulness, which I love that you brought that up though.
I guess that one thing I was going to ask, but maybe we just answered it, is how can we, if our friend is in distress, how can we use mindfulness in that moment?
Yeah, it depends on the goal. I think that if if your loved one is distressed, mindful practice on itself would just help you take a step back and keep your keep your attention where it needs to be and not spiral, because especially when you're interacting with someone, especially if they're distressed, that's like ripe for your mind making judgments. Oh, they're wrong. Oh my God, this is going to be terrible. They're thinking this, they're thinking that. We do a lot of mind reading, which is, making assumptions of what the other person is thinking and feeling, which can lead to a lot of problems. Like, oh, they're doing this, that means they don't care, and blah, blah, blah. But if you're seeing your loved one in distress, you can just stay present, stay focused on them, not spiral into judgments and thoughts, but just really be there with them. And even that presence is helpful to be with them, right? And to really take things for as they are, not your interpretations or assumptions. And that could really stop a lot of fights. It could make you aware of what's happening in the moment. So you could say, hey, I think we actually need to cool down and diffuse and not get dysregulated, right? So it could put you in the driver's seat of that moment.
Yeah. Another thing I thought of is how social media is the very opposite of mindfulness in so many ways. And so I guess this is just a word for if you feel like you're a heavy social media user or it's been distressing you, just think about how, social media is filled with judgments. I should look like this person. I should have the life of this person. I should post only the best content, only the photo where I look the most beautiful. What do people think of this photo? Are people commenting enough? Like, all of these judgments coming up. And it also really takes you out of the present moment. I remember coming off The Bachelor feeling like I needed to grow my social media, and it was like, okay, I do all of these cool things in New York, and I genuinely did, but having the pressure to photograph all of them and post them on social media just completely ripped me out of the present moment. Because suddenly I'm thinking, oh, this hamburger looks good. I guess I should snap a photo of it. Or, oh, these drinks are so pretty. Let me snap this Broadway show, whatever. Instead of just enjoying the taste of the hamburger, the visual of the drink, what's happening in front of me, the company that I'm in, the need to take photos with your friends all of the time to document these moments. Like, sure, taking photos sometimes is great, but if it's this compulsive need to post so that other people can then judge, it really is anti-mindfulness. And so I would just caution against losing yourself in social media, or just like when you use social media, maybe just take a beat and be like, is this going to take me out of a mindful state? What is the purpose of my use right now? Is it important right now that I be mindful? And then this might not be the best tool to use at this moment.
Yeah, I don't think it's an accident that as our society gets more distracting, right, with social media, like things that are taking us out of the present moment, all the screens that we have, all the distractions, that mindfulness is also on the rise, really, to like almost it's kind of like counteracting what's happening in some parts of society. It's like we're getting overwhelmed, we're getting distracted, we're not present, we're checking our email, checking our phones constantly, we're not here enjoying this present moment. So of course there's a pull to practices that help us actually do that, which is mindfulness. So I think they kind of go hand in hand in terms of why mindfulness is becoming so popular and so present in popular culture and in mental health treatments.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just a final thing is to help another friend be mindful. I know you've said in the past, like maybe walking them through just a few deep breaths, 4 seconds in, 7 seconds out. Doesn't have to be that exact number, but longer on the exhale. Any other tips? Noticing when they're making these judgments and gently bringing them back? Or?
Yeah, especially if they're distressed. It's a lot of these grounding techniques of just bringing attention to what you can sense with your 5 senses. So you could be like, okay, I know you're really distressed now. Just feel your feet on the floor. Just feel what it's like. Feel your toes on the ground, your feet in your shoes, or feel the temperature of the room, or look at this beautiful picture. Let's really look at it with our eyes, right? Like just bringing attention to the present moment without any sense that could grab that attention. So I think that's one way to do it, but especially with their permission. But I mean, in general, I have so many resources and so many ways that people can practice that I really love. You know, if going to yoga class, going to retreat centers is really great. There's my favorite ones are Insight Meditation Society and Mind and Life Institute. Mind and Life Institute was started by the Dalai Lama, and it's more about promoting the research on it, but also research and practice. So I love that society in general. I'm very active in that group. But, you know, retreat centers where you do like a weekend or full week of meditation, that's really a deep dive. But there's also local classes, like people have local sitting groups and yoga classes, meditation, like restorative yoga. But, you know, without that, I say there's a lot of apps out there. There's like Headspace is the most popular one. They do a really good job because they have really nice graphics and a really calming, very popular meditation teacher. But there's also free ones. Like I think, I really like Insight Timer and Calm and the Mindfulness app. So we're not being paid by any of those things. Literally just, no. I think those have been really helpful. Or, you know, I also recommend especially if you're super busy and want to just jump into mindfulness, you can really weave in a mindfulness practice in your daily life. Whether it's like, okay, every time I sit down for a meal, I'm going to take 3 deep breaths, 3 mindful deep breaths, right? Or every time I brush my teeth, I'm going to do it mindfully, really feel the bristles in my mouth and really go slowly. Or my coffee will be the mindfulness moment where I really smell and really taste and really take in the sensory experience of coffee, right? So if people are really busy and say, I can't possibly, you know, add in something more, we recommend just weaving it into something that you do every day, but just do it mindfully, paying attention to the present moment.
Eating is a great obvious one because it's so enjoyable, but oftentimes we're just shoveling, you know, food into our mouth while we're like looking at our phone or, you know, watching kids destroy something down the hall. I mean, you know, petting the dog or the cat and just really feeling the fur, feeling the purr. When you're hugging your spouse or a partner. Lots of, or like, even if you're like gardening, just like feeling your hands in the soil, just like taking a beat, whatever you're doing, and just say like, what does this feel like? Like, what does the sun feel like right now? It doesn't even have to be more than 10 seconds, but just that little practice like, throughout the day can help train you and bring a lot of joy, I think.
Yeah, already those simple practices there's so much evidence to show that it reduces anxiety, depression, ADHD, all these other things, right? Mm-hmm. So already those are helpful, but you just might feel a little bit like you just have another way of coping and sitting with really difficult experiences to make you feel more in control of them. Yeah. That's what I would say the benefit is. But I have a couple great books that I'll put on the website. My favorite authors are Jon Kabat-Zinn. He's one of the classic guys. He brought mindfulness-based stress reduction to the U.S. And Pema Chodron, Thich Nhat Hanh, and Jack Kornfield are some of my favorites. Sharon Salzberg. Put this all on the website again because all their books are just really fantastic, really easy way to get into mindfulness and understanding it. So there's lots of great stuff out there, and I just encourage people to just try out different kinds of meditation, different ways of approaching it. It changed my life, so that's why I'm such a big believer. And I know that there's a lot of therapies out there that use it to really enhance the interventions. They really like boost the effectiveness of just like normal therapy. Mm-hmm. So it's really powerful and just really simple. So
absolutely. Okay, well, I hope you all found this helpful, and remember to take a mindful moment today. And we'll see you all next week. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.